none of that. It all seems to be just fine. I haven't had a fever, I haven't had a cough.
Are you back to your 4-minute miles then?
Yeah, that's right. I'm not under oath, right? Yeah.
That's good.
Yes, so my colleagues have joined, John and Lindsay and Lauren, and John Heilman, I think, is having some internet trouble, so he may be on the phone, so you might not see his face.
All righty.
I think.
So Lindsay, who's that a poster of behind you?
It's Wonder Woman.
Oh, okay.
And I actually got it at a art gallery and up on Sunset. So.
What is it? What does it say? I can't read it from here.
It says "Twirl on my haters."
Excellent.
It's mostly because my apartment is small and messy, so this makes it look like it's neither of those things. Or maybe it still communicates that it's small, but definitely not messy.
Well, you know, there's of course, because you can find anything now online, there is some group online, some entity, self-made entity that rates your virtual backgrounds.
Mm-hmm.
So I think I got an honorable mention for my roll top, which is getting a lot of feedback.
Is it a virtual background?
No, it's not a virtual background, but they
I was like, what?
Do you want to see my virtual background?
Yeah.
I can put, because we haven't started the meeting yet, right?
No.
Okay, I'm going to show you my virtual background.
Virtual, oh, nice.
That's my virtual background.
That's a good one. Good.
So.
I can't do virtual backgrounds because the hair masking is sort of weird and I lose like pieces of my hair into the image. So.
Yeah, you have to be, I guess, at the right depth, away from the camera or something.
Yeah, we did a Democratic Club meeting last week, and Lillian Raffel was running the meeting, and her husband was sitting behind her, but he was sitting just far enough back that he was like coming in and out of view because of her virtual background. It's very funny.
Mayor,
yes.
We are starting the meeting. We're trying to get everybody together, so the meeting is starting.
Okay, good to know. But we don't have John Heilman yet, right? He's still signing in?
We have him here. I just don't have him on video.
Right. I don't, well, usually understood, but sometimes, usually, I think there's a square just with his name to show that he's on the phone, but we'll take your word for it. And also, the city manager and the city attorney, are they also joining? There we go. John, I see John Heilman now. That's good.
I see John Duran talking, but I don't hear anything.
His microphone is muted. Okay. And I see Paul is there. All right. And there's Lauren. Okay. So we shall call this meeting to order. Let's all rise and say the Pledge of Allegiance. Pledge allegiance to
the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
City Clerk, can we have a roll call, please?
Yes, Councilmember Duran.
Here.
Councilmember Heilman.
Here.
Councilmember Meister.
Here.
Mayor Pro Tem Horvath.
Here.
Mayor D'Amico.
Yes. And City Attorney, may we have a report of the closed session agenda?
Yes, hi, good evening. The City Council convened a teleconference closed session at 6 p.m. this evening. There were no members of the public to speak. and talked about one item listed on the posted agenda and took no reportable actions. Thank you.
Thank you very much. All right, now we're going to talk through the approval of the agenda. Are there any changes from the city clerk?
No
Hearing
changes.
none. No changes. Okay, and from any of my colleagues, any interest in? Yes, John or Lauren?
I was going to suggest that we put 5A, the agreement to advance tourism, and 5B, water quality, on consent. And I'd like to ask if we could please table 2F, which is the update on pending state legislation on housing development and land use, for the next meeting, and have it not on consent, because there are some constituents who would like a little more time to study it and to have some input.
I see everyone nodding their head without objection. Any other changes?
Mayor, I think staff was asking that we continue item 3A. We just want to do that.
Yeah, it says that there, and we'll do that then, but I think that shouldn't be a problem. So can I have a motion to approve the agenda?
So moved.
So moved by Lauren Meister, second by Lindsay Horvath. Can we do this in all in favor, or do you want a voice vote, City Clerk?
A voice vote, please.
All right, read our names.
Councilmember Duran?
Aye.
Councilmember Heilman?
Aye.
Councilmember Meister?
Aye.
Mayor Pro Tem Horvath?
Aye.
Mayor D'Amico?
Yes. All right, we have an agenda. Are there any adjournment motions this evening? Councilmember Horvath, Mayor Pro Tem.
Yes, thank you, Mayor. I have two adjournments tonight. The first, I'd like to adjourn in memory of Gary George Bowie, who was the executive director of Being Alive, West Hollywood nonprofit organization near and dear to many of us. He spent his life dedicated to fighting HIV by ending stigma and restoring dignity while increasing access to care. And he passed away on April 7th from complications related to COVID-19. Prior to his work at Being Alive, Gary served as a founding board member and executive director of the Long Beach AIDS Foundation in 2004. And in addition to his community work, Gary had a passion for preserving history and served as an archivist for the Satyrs Motorcycle Club. He was a respected community leader, an advocate, and a devoted family member, and he is survived by his husband of 20 years, Jeff. And we extend our condolences to Jeff and all of Gary's friends. We know this is a difficult time. I'd also like to adjourn in memory of Carol Belsanti, who passed away on March 25th at the age of 78. Carol was a registered nurse who worked in community clinics as well as psychiatric hospitals. She was an active volunteer with her local friends of the library group and a nonprofit thrift shop. She taught English as a second language and worked the polls at nearly every election. And early on in the AIDS crisis, she volunteered where she could make the most difference. And she raised 4 girls: Laura, Lisa Belsanti, who of course we know in our City Hall family, Gina and Jennifer, and she was a doting nana to her 6 grandkids. And we extend our condolences to Lisa, Becky, Nora, and all of their family at this time. And there are no military deaths or mass shootings to report since our last meeting. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you. Anyone?
Yes.
Lauren?
Thank you. First, I'd like to adjourn in memory of Anne Farovec. She was the daughter of a Norwegian minister. Anne moved to West Hollywood West in 1986. She was very involved in neighborhood issues, loved her neighbors and friends in the area, and was a generous person, often entertaining on her lovely patio. She battled cancer for 13 years while still working as a tour guide internationally and establishing other businesses. In recent years, you may have seen her walking a puppy or 2 as a dog sitter. Anne was 77 years young. We will all miss her beautiful spirit in the neighborhood. I'd also like to adjourn in memory of Phyllis Lyon. Phyllis Lyon was a lesbian activist and gay marriage trailblazer. She married her partner, Del Martin, in 2008 and became part of the first legal same-sex union in California. Lyon was a journalist who met her lifelong partner while working at a magazine in Seattle. The couple moved to San Francisco in 1953. Throughout their 55-year relationship, Lyon and Martin were politically engaged, including editing one of the first lesbian magazines in the country. They were among the first lesbians to join the National Organization for Women. The couple also helped form the Council on Religion and the Homosexual to persuade ministers to accept lesbians and gay men into churches. Lyon was 95. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you. And
Mayor?
yes. Oh, please.
Oh, I wanted to request that we adjourn in memory of Gabor Kalman. Gabor was a award-winning filmmaker and a champion of documentary film. He was born in Hungary, lived with his family in an integrated Jewish community then until he was 10 years old. When Hitler marched into Hungary, Gabor was forced to flee, and he became one of the hidden children of the Holocaust. He was concealed and given a fake identity to protect him. In 1956, he was able to flee Hungary and come to the United States. He found his true passion for filmmaking, and one of his most celebrated documentary films was about his hometown and the loss of its once thriving Jewish population. He died recently at age 85.
Thank you. Without objection, any other? I have two. One is for Matt Holtzman, longtime host on KCRW and the producer behind several shows, including The Business, a weekly program and podcast about the entertainment industry, and The Document, which combined Holtzman's love for documentaries and his passion for the audio format. He had a great love for movies and created Matt's Movies, a film club. I was a member for members that grew into a true community of film lovers featuring interviews with directors and producers. Matt was a brilliant audio storyteller. He was passionate about his work and was the embodiment of KCRW to colleagues and listeners. Also, I'm sad to report that Anthony Brooks and Philip Cy Brooks passed away. Anthony Brooks was a city council member from the city of Live Oak, Texas, and Anthony and his husband Philip died of complications from COVID-19. Our fellow council member Brooks joined the Live Oak City Council in 2015. He served as a member of the Economic Development Corporation, and he served honorably in the United States Army. His husband, Philip, was also an active member of the community. Philip was a valued member of the EDC also and brought a unique perspective to the board. Philip was the owner of a salon in San Antonio and worked hard to make it a successful small business. Without objection, we will adjourn in the names of everyone mentioned. Now we have presentations, and for those of you watching from home, you may have noticed in the secret square, we have our Congressman Adam Schiff, and we are honored to have you here. These meetings, it turns out, online are very well attended in this time in West Hollywood. Discussions of rental costs and businesses having their challenges, and we are incredibly honored, Congressman Schiff, to have you join us to talk with us about what's happening in Washington and perhaps to answer some of our questions as well. Congressman Adam Schiff.
Mayor, thank you for letting me join you. It's a pleasure to see you even at a distance and to join your fellow council members. Hello, everybody. I just wanted to give a quick update on what we're likely to take up in Congress this week and just a few broad thoughts on the challenges yet to come. As you know, we've been working to see if we can come to agreement on a follow-on package that deals with a number of the deficiencies in the CARES Act. One of the things that the CARES Act did was establish this small business lending program. That fund had reached capacity and it was necessary to replenish the fund. At the same time, there were a number of problems that were identified in the small business PPP program. In particular, and I'm sure many of those watching may have had this experience, if you're a small business and you're a customer of a larger bank, it has been very difficult to get funding in the program. Many of the large banks chose to favor their larger, more lucrative customers. Those that banked at smaller institutions generally got better service and managed to get through the program, but many didn't. And so there's a need to replenish the funds in the program. But we also wanted to make programmatic changes to make sure that every small business had equal access, that the banks weren't going to be able to play favorites. In particular, that those that were already struggling to access capital weren't going to be further imperiled by this pandemic. The pandemic is hitting poorer communities, minority communities in particularly lethal ways. Some of the numbers are just staggering, where you have states where, for example, the African-American population may be only 7%, I think like Wisconsin, 7% of the state, but represent 40% of the casualties from COVID. We're seeing just tremendously disparate harm from this virus. And we didn't want to compound that by making it even more difficult for those who are most struggling to keep their businesses afloat. To be candid, Mitch McConnell, Kevin McCarthy, the public leadership wasn't interested in making any fixes to the program. They just wanted to put more money in it. We have been able to negotiate an additional $60 billion earmarked for smaller lending institutions, which are typically more conducive to helping the smaller of the small businesses. That's still not going to, though, address the problem of the big banks and small businesses that happen to be customers of big banks that may not have the ability now to go to a small bank because many small banks are only dealing with their own existing customers. So it's a very partial answer. We also wanted to provide funding for hospitals and health clinics, additional funding, because they're really running low and they're the first providers. We wanted more money for testing, which is going to be absolutely essential to even talk about reopening, to dramatically escalate testing. We wanted to provide funding for states and cities and also small cities like West Hollywood that got left out of the last package because the last package either had funding go through the state or only go to cities if they were above 500,000. And of course, the states are already reeling. And so for small cities like West Hollywood to go hat in hand to the state isn't going to be met with a lot of success given the difficulty the states are already in. Again, Kevin McCarthy, Mitch McConnell, utterly unwilling to address at this time the problems facing cities and states. There is some skepticism, which I share, about why that's the case, and skepticism that it may be the president wants the states beholden to him, even as he attempts to shed responsibility onto the states for lack of testing, lack of protective gear, and other deficiencies of the federal government. But in any event, we will probably come in later this week to vote on replenishing small business funds, making that earmark for smaller lending institutions to try to help the smaller of the small businesses. There will be hospital funding. There will be $25 billion for additional testing. And that will be just an interim package before the next major legislation. In the next major legislation, I am certainly going to continue to fight for funding for states and cities, but also, frankly, given the magnitude of the economic challenge, I'm a big supporter and co-sponsor of something called the Payroll Guarantee Act. That's legislation that would guarantee payroll of all businesses, large and small, as well as municipalities to help make up for revenue losses to meet payroll. It's what Britain is doing. It's what Sweden, Norway, and many other European countries are doing. It's simpler, it's more equitable, it's faster, it's less bureaucratic, and I think it makes a lot of sense. It's a problem. It's a solution as big as the problem. So I'm going to continue pushing and advocating for that. Finally, there's a national debate, as you know, about when to reopen. And the health experts tell us, and the experience of other countries tell us, there are really 5 things necessary before we can think about reopening. We need to have testing and far greater availability than we have. There's a lot of happy talk going on at the White House about the availability of testing. But you talk to our hospitals, our healthcare providers, and they will tell you they either don't have the tests or they have the tests, but the labs can't do the processing of the tests because they lack the reagents, they lack the swabs, they lack the protective gear, other necessary equipment to get those tests done and processed. So there's got to be much, much more testing. There has to be tracing of those that turn out to be positive, so we know who they're in contact with. There has to be isolation of those who have come in contact with the virus, and there has to be social distancing. We need all of these things in order to even contemplate reopening. And frankly, it really frightens me to see states like Georgia that have made the decision today to reopen, when if you look at the curve in Georgia, it continues to go up in an escalating way. And so I think when you look at the experience of countries that have done this well, like Singapore, like Taiwan, like South Korea, when they have experimented at reopening, they have seen too often a flare-up of the virus. But because they have the mechanism in place to tamp it down again, they've been able to do so. Well, Georgia doesn't have that. Neither do any of the other states at this point. And that's really the infrastructure we need to build out before we can responsibly talk about reopening. So little thumbnail there, 2 other very quick items. Apologize for going on this long. The first is, I know there are big gaps in what we've done this far. There are gaps like the LGBT Center, which is a phenomenal healthcare provider in our community. It's over 500 employees. It doesn't qualify for the SBA program. I've been pushing to expand it to healthcare clinics, to expand it to organizations above 500 that are on the front lines, like the LGBT Center. Because Republicans are unwilling to make programmatic changes, I don't know that we're going to get that in this package. But we are fighting to make available, and I wrote to the Fed chair, the Main Street lending program to clinics like the LGBT Center. So we hope the Fed will take action, even if the Republicans in Congress thus far are unwilling. I know it's also vital that cities like West Hollywood be able to make up for lost revenue. We are struggling to put in this package for this week a provision that will let you access some of the CARES Act funding, not just for pandemic response, but also for revenue loss. So we'll let you know if we're successful with that. And finally, the rent situation and the homeless situation. We did provide a mechanism for partial relief, funding, billions of funding for homeless, not enough, but we did have some funding in the original CARES Act. We also had a moratorium on foreclosures for those with federally backed mortgages. And for those who have properties that are federally mortgaged, we have a moratorium on evictions of renters. And we know that cities have also taken steps to allow renters to postpone their rent payments and not face eviction. I am co-sponsoring legislation that would provide $250 billion to try to help small cities, as well as co-sponsor of a letter campaign for $100 billion in relief for renters to try to ease this burden on both renters and those that rent to, that are small landlords that rent to individuals that are also going through their own crisis right now. So those efforts are in progress. But thank you for letting me give this update.
Absolutely. Any of my colleagues wish to ask a question or two? John, please.
Congressman, thanks for joining us tonight. Thank you for being so thorough and all the issues that you highlighted. That first package really gave relief to around the country. Those were but that was only 36. So I'm really happy to hear that we're going back to the drawing board to try to get relief for the smaller cities. I do want to mention just a couple of issues for you to consider as you go back to Washington. One is on the issue of testing. The LGBT community has expertise in this area that is not being tapped. We have been through an epidemic. We know the difference between an antigen test and an antibody test. We know why ELISA tests are important. We know about contact tracing. We had to do all this in the 80s. And there seems to be a belief out there from a lot of people that if we can just do testing, we can let people go back to work. It's not just testing in a snapshot of any one moment. It's continuous testing, continuous testing, continuous testing. Because even though I may be negative to COVID tomorrow, there's no guarantee I won't be positive next week. So I have to continuously be tested. And those who've already been exposed, and it appears that many are asymptomatic and have been exposed to the virus, just the knowledge that maybe I survived COVID while being exposed without symptoms is a good reminder to me and others that we can be carriers of the virus and not feel any different at all, not realizing that we are being a vector of contagion to others. So I think that as time moves forward, I hope that you and other members from the Los Angeles delegation will consider tapping into the expertise that the LGBT community has on these issues around pandemic, epidemic, testing, contact tracing, et cetera, because we've been through it before, and we paid a very heavy price in terms of loss to our community when we went through it before. And we're standing by, ready to offer our expertise and our experiences on how to do some of these things. And then the last thing I just want to say is the issue of tenants. Thank you very much for bringing it up. I'm glad to hear you're putting money in there for renter relief. We have a city where 80% or 78% of our population are renters. We have passed a moratorium. We're going to defer rent for 2 to maybe 4 months, depending on the actions we take tonight and other weeks ahead. But people who aren't working can't suddenly come up with $8,000 or $10,000 when the moratorium is raised because they're not able to do that. And our landlords are also many mom and pop apartment building owners who can't sustain that sort of loss. Unfortunately, we can't print money like Washington can. We have to balance budgets, the city, the county, the state. And so we're doing our best to keep our residents afloat. We were very fortunate to put away a couple $100 million in reserves, and we're going to be dipping into them, but we can't sustain that for a long period of time, and we're going to have relief from Washington. I thank you for your representation, sir. We couldn't have a better member of Congress, Adam. Thank you very much.
John, thank you. And let me just mention a couple things. You're absolutely right, both in terms of the experience within the LGBT community that really should be tapped right now in how to deal with this requirement of testing and tracing. You may have seen, and it came out just within the last few hours, I think USC did a study on how many people were walking around asymptomatic and positive, and found that an astonishingly higher number of Los Angelinos are positive than we ever knew. Now, this is a small sample thus far, but it shows two things. It shows the virus is already much more widespread than we knew. And it shows on the positive side that the mortality may be less than we thought because more people have it than we do. But I think it does underscore the importance of testing to find out who has it. And when you have a positive result, to be able to trace who they were in contact with, and also figure out all of the thorny privacy issues that accompany that. How to be able to use technology, which can be very powerful, but also how to protect privacy at the same time. So, there's probably no community that is in a better position to offer assistance, expertise, counsel than the LGBTQ community in wrestling with some of those topics. In terms of printing money and the federal government, I tell you, one of the things that really gnaws at me right now is this $2 trillion tax cut that the president and Republicans pushed through Congress a couple years ago. The first CARES Act was a $2 trillion package. The $2 trillion that was given away to large companies and wealthy families in that tax cut for the purpose of stock buybacks and all the rest of that was money we could really use right now. And it would have paid for that first CARES Act in its entirety. And so those were resources that were squandered that we really could use right now. And I think it's a lesson that, you know, you need to save for a rainy day. And we wish we could claw back and have that funding to meet the present need. But, you know, I'm certainly very mindful of the challenge that that renters are going through right now, that small cities are going through right now. And this has got to be part of the next package. You know, frankly, it's one of the reasons why I think we need to go much bigger and broader to something like a payroll guarantee, where, you know, we allow businesses large and small and cities to keep their employees, even if they are working from home, even if they're furloughed and not able to work from home. They're still employed. They're still getting a paycheck. They can still use that paycheck to pay the rent. They don't have to look for a job when we're on the other side of this curve. It's better all around. And, you know, finally, one thing I did fight for in the CARES Act and with success is something that I think impacts a lot of folks in West Hollywood. And that is a lot of people in the industry who don't have traditional employers, who go from one job to another, one contract to another, one commercial to another, one show to another, would not have been protected by unemployment compensation. I was able to lead an effort in the House to make sure that they would get covered for the first time, and they are covered under the CARES Act. So I do think that one of the things this virus is teaching us is how many holes there are in our safety net. And that's one that we should fill even after this pandemic is gone. Holes in our healthcare system, holes in our unemployment compensation system, holes in access to capital, holes throughout our society. We need to be thinking about, as we plan our way forward, how to build a better, more equitable, more just America as we emerge from this.
Councilmember Horvath, please. Mayor Pro Tem Horvath, please.
Thank you, Mayor. One thing I did want to add to the conversation, as you know, Congressman, West Hollywood is the first pro-choice city in America, and we have a Planned Parenthood location that is serving not just members of our community faithfully here in West Hollywood, but now we are seeing with all of the attacks on women's rights that are happening throughout the country, we are finding that our location in West Hollywood is a location that is providing essential services for people all around the country. And so in addition to a lot of what Councilmember Duran said, and I do want to echo testing, because that is key to helping us get back to whatever our new normal becomes. I do want to also encourage that we think about PPE for Planned Parenthood and support for our Planned Parenthood clinics. The one in West Hollywood, like I said, is providing essential services for women. After the announcement was made in Texas that very week, we had 5 women come to the West Hollywood location, I was told. And so we know that these attacks will continue. I am so sorry to see partisanship infiltrate our conversation in a time of crisis like this. But I know that this is an issue that's important to you. And so I just wanted to voice it here as our community is interested in this issue as well. Thank you.
Thank you. And I very much appreciate what you're saying and treasure Planned Parenthood, both in our district and all around the country. They provide life-saving healthcare to so many people. And we have a particular fondness for Planned Parenthood in our family because when many years ago, my in-laws, before they were my in-laws, were trying to conceive, they went to a Planned Parenthood after many years of not being able to bear another child. And with the help of a Planned Parenthood, they gave birth to my now wife. So I feel particularly indebted to Planned Parenthood. And have a special affinity.
Councilmember Meister, I think you had a comment, and then John, and then I have one, and then I think we'll wrap up. Please.
Yep. Thank you very much, and thank you, Congressman Schiff, for everything that you're doing. I feel your pain to know that Georgia is opening up when they are the home of the CDC is just beyond, beyond me. I do want to ask if there is a better way to target the stimulus checks. It seems that they just went out, and whether or not you were working, you may have received a check if you were working, and then people who aren't currently working have not received checks. So if there's any way to better target any future stimulus checks, that would be helpful. And then I would just ask, please do your best to protect Dr. Fauci, because he's all we got. So thank you for everything you're doing.
Yeah. I think that in the early days of this, there was a real urgency to get money to people just ASAP. And this was at least it was perceived to be a simple, quick way to do so. I think, and have felt this way now for a couple months, that we would be far better off with a universal program of paycheck protection, essentially payroll protection, rather than a quilt of a small business program, a large industry program, a stimulus check program. I think that to the degree we can help people keep their jobs, we can help businesses make their payroll, we can help cities retain their employees, we avoid all of these downstream terrible consequences. And so I'm going to continue pushing for that kind of comprehensive approach rather than a piecemeal approach. I don't know in the next CARES Act whether there will be another push to have another round of stimulus checks under the same criteria, or a smaller monthly or recurrent check. But I agree with you. It may be efficient at one level, but it's not particularly effective at another level. They're not really stimulus checks. They're too paltry to have a stimulative impact in an economy where people have to stay home. They're really meant as emergency cash to help people pay the next bill. And of course, some are more in desperate need of that emergency help than others.
Councilmember Heilman, please. Oh, I think you're not being heard, John.
Okay, sorry about that, Adam.
There you go.
Thank you for what you're doing. And I just want to echo my colleagues and their thanks for your leadership and your efforts to advocate on behalf of the city and advocate on behalf of all Americans. So thank you for that. My colleague John Duran raised the unique experience of the LGBT community and our knowledge about testing. I want to raise another issue. We also have a lot of experience with discrimination. And I hope that Congress will be looking at the issue of discrimination against people who are perceived to be testing positive, who have tested positive and have recovered, because that kind of stigmatizing and discrimination is going to really put a damper on our efforts to test as many people as possible and get them into the appropriate treatment and care. So I've already heard people, and I've seen articles where people are stigmatizing the people who work in healthcare or are perceived to have been affected. And we really need to nip that in the bud right away. The other issue I wanted to bring up, and we're focusing a lot on our local experience, but the president's decision to defund the World Health Organization at a time when it is in most need of support and funding is really just appalling. And I don't know what Congress can do, but in the background here is a program I'm involved in Africa. And when you're talking about countries that have no functioning healthcare system in most places, in most times, the thought of them having to deal with COVID on top of all the other problems that they currently have is just unimaginable. So I hope that Congress, or at least the right-thinking people in Congress, recognize that this is not just a problem of the United States, and if we're not addressing this and helping the fight elsewhere, it's just going to come back to the United States one way or another. So I just wanted to throw that out, and thank you for everything you're doing to try to help us and to help our residents.
John, thank you. And, just a couple of quick comments on your observations. I think you're absolutely right. We have to protect people who have tested positive for the virus from any kind of discrimination. And certainly those in healthcare fields that are on the front lines right now ought to be met with nothing but applause wherever they go and whatever they do for their heroism right now. And for many of them who have a military background, what they're seeing now is more traumatic than what they experienced in theaters of war. I'm also concerned, frankly, with the reverse, and that is in states that have open orders prematurely. I'm concerned with situations where employers order their employees back to work in a workplace that isn't safe and don't protect them with the proper gear and force them to choose between their health or their job. So I'm deeply concerned about that, and we've seen some evidence of that already. And I think we have to guard against that kind of situation as well. One pernicious form of that, frankly, is what happened in Wisconsin by forcing people to choose their health or their franchise. And I'm deeply worried about some exploiting this pandemic as a method of disenfranchising people in November and forcing them to choose their health or their vote, which is why I think it ought to be a national right and a priority in any future package that Americans have the ability to vote by mail wherever they are. So those, I think, are important priorities. In terms of the president's halting funding for WHO, this is exactly the wrong move in terms of the healthcare of Americans and people around the world. It is a move the president is making for patently political reasons. I think, and I'll express my own opinion here, this is plainly the president's effort to deflect responsibility for his tragic mishandling of this for the first several months. When he was downplaying the severity of the virus, when he was complimenting China, what a great job China was doing, he is attacking the WHO for doing a fraction of what he did in the early days and weeks, and indeed stuff that he continues to do during this crisis. In a normal world, the president of the United States would not only be unifying the country, unifying the states, not forcing states to compete with each other, but would also be leading the global effort to fight a pandemic. But we are not doing that at all under this president. In fact, we are retreating more than ever. We're attacking the international health organizations that are going to play the most important role in some of the international impacts of this. And John, I am terrified about what this is going to do and the havoc it's going to wreak on many poorer, less developed countries unless there is a global effort to do something globally. I have visited places around the world, as I know you have, where there are 1 million people living in a small confined area, sometimes quite literally living on top of each other. You get a virus in that kind of a neighborhood, and it is going to be utter devastation. And so we need to be really leading a global effort that is commensurate with the size of this threat. Because just as in the United States, where this is going to have and is having a disproportionate harm to communities of color and poor communities, the disparate impact around the world is going to be every bit as devastating.
Thank you, Congressman Schiff. That It's so amazing to have you here. I guess if I had any comment at all, it would be that we're all very much in the middle of this, maybe at the beginning of this, but there will be a time after this or nearly after this. And I think one of the things that my colleagues, my day job in planning and in building making, and what we notice is that there's probably some good lessons about taking care of the environment and reducing traffic and working remotely. And there's not a lot of infrastructure to do that. There's been a lot of talk in the last 10 years about moving people out of the offices into their home, and then suddenly we did it in 14 days. And it would be interesting to me, and perhaps tonight is not the night, but to consider how this conversation might develop, because if we could say, cause everyone to work from home 2 days a week, that would reduce traffic by 40% and would reduce climate harm by maybe a similar percentage. And so I think there are probably some good things that can come from this and some leadership from the federal level. If there's some around and available, you would know better than I. Maybe not from the president's desk, but maybe from a Democratic Congress after November. And a Democratic president, I know I'm not supposed to be saying all that, but I think it's really hopeful in some way what we're seeing, these kinds of changes to our environment. And so hopefully that will be part of what we also look at moving forward.
Mayor, I think you're absolutely right. Long after this virus is passed, America is going to work differently than it has. And, you know, the kind of conference we're having right now, families are having all over the country with their loved ones. And people are finding out that they can do so much of their work from home that they never imagined they could do without commuting to the office every day. So I think this is going to have enormous impacts on changing American life in ways that it's hard for us to see at the moment. And I too like to look at the silver lining in these otherwise, dark cloud-laden times. The only other thing I'd love to add it to just close, and I know you have other parts of your agenda tonight, is I know how many people in the community are really desperately worried about their lives, their jobs, the business that they spent a whole lifetime building, their community and their country. And I do think it's important to underscore that we're gonna get through this. And when you're in the midst of it, it's hard to see when you're gonna get through it, and sometimes hard to see if you're gonna get through it, but this too will pass. And we're very fortunate to have great local leadership, like in the city of West Hollywood. We're fortunate to have great state leadership. And we are really fortunate to have some enormously courageous people right now working in our hospitals and our clinics, and working on our grocery stores, and working to provide other essential services. And, I think we all have a renewed appreciation for our letter carriers, for our delivery people, and everyone who's sticking their neck out right now to keep us going. So a profound thanks to those of our mutual constituents who are watching that are in those fields. And I hope you all stay healthy and stay well.
Thank you very much. Have a nice evening.
You too. Take care now.
Thank you.
I believe there are no other presentations this evening. Is that correct?
Correct.
Thank you. So now we will move to public comment. The city values your public comment. Public comment period is limited to 20 minutes with 2 minutes allotted for each speaker. And perhaps before we begin, City Clerk Yvonne, why don't I just call you Yvonne? Yvonne, you could explain that we did receive written public comment, and it was distributed to every council member at various times.
Yes, correct. Constituents were able to provide online e-comments through the city's website. and participate via with general public comment or a comment on a particular agenda item. Those comments were gathered together, emailed to the City Council, and placed online for the public to view.
Great. And now we will take public comment by telephone, and you are managing that. So I'm going to sit back and let you take it over.
Yes, we have our first speaker, Karen O'Keefe. You have 2 minutes to speak.
Good evening, council members and mayor. I'm Karen O'Keefe of West Hollywood. I'm speaking as a member of the West Hollywood Bicycle Coalition. Since the stay-at-home order was issued, we've witnessed a dramatic reduction in the number of car trips that have been made. Alarmingly, though, a large number of the remaining drivers are speeding. This increases the risk of collisions and the damage that cars do if they hit a pedestrian or a person on a bike. Meanwhile, gyms and parks are shut down, but exercise and fresh air remain important to our physical and mental health. For some of us, biking and walking are our modes of transportation. Many more of my neighbors seem to be outside lately. I've noticed some neighbors walking and jogging in streets to pass at safe distances. However, given the danger and the stress of multi-ton vehicles, many more use the sidewalk exclusively and pass far less than the required 6 feet of distance, resulting in many an alarm to comment on next door. So the LA Times recently editorialized that there's a far better option than requiring all of us to navigate the social distancing obstacle course. We should swiftly follow the lead of other cities, including Oakland and Minneapolis, to make more street space available for people who are walking, jogging, or biking. We already have plans underway for a neighborhood greenway on Willoughby, and we should use diverters and prevent pass-through traffic on Willoughby. Thank you for your service, and good night.
Thank you very much.
And next we have Seppi Shine.
Yes. Hello, my name is Seppi Shine. I am a 11-year resident and renter in West Hollywood. During the last city council meeting, there were some discussions by council about extending the emergency moratorium on evictions. The council decided to wait to see how this crisis develops. Since then, the stay-at-home order has been extended to May 15th. I urge you to extend the eviction moratorium to include the non-payment of rent for at least through June, if not longer. People that have lost their jobs cannot be expected to find a job mid-May and come up with June's rent in 2 weeks. A lot of people are still not getting their money from the EDD and are in dire need. I want to acknowledge the city for posting information online and emails and holding an online seminar to let renters know their rights. These methods, while commendable, though, are only accessed by a limited amount of people. A lot of renters still don't know the information about their rights. Please send a mailer out. We still haven't received any mailer that city manager, you said was ready to go after the last city council meeting. It would be very helpful for the renters to receive a mailer. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Seppi Shine.
And next we have Elizabeth Polly. Elizabeth, you have 2 minutes to speak.
Hi, my name is Elizabeth Polly. I'm an artist living and working in West Hollywood. I've never before missed a rent payment. My gallery show has been canceled, and frankly, no one's thinking about buying art at this time. Beyond my story, I believe West Hollywood officials need to strike a balance where rent is suspended for low-income families who live paycheck to paycheck and have no way of paying back rent. I expect more out of the progressive city of West Hollywood. We are the creative city, after all, to be setting precedents to protect their residents. Mayor Garcetti posted on Twitter that he's behind a suspension of rent and mortgages. West Hollywood should be leading and not following this call to action. I'm asking the city of West Hollywood to call on the governor to protect tenants by suspending rent for the most vulnerable. Thank you for your service and your time.
Thank you, Ms. Polly.
Next we have Larry, you have 2 minutes.
Preparedness.
Larry?
Yes, hi. Hello? Hello?
Hi, you have 2
Hi.
minutes.
Hi. Hello, everybody. Today I'd like to talk about emergency preparedness. During this crisis, it has become clear that we, the city of West Hollywood, does not have our own supplies or our own plan. Masks for residents to prevent community spread, instructions to landlords, and notices in our multifamily buildings required a sense of urgency that was missing at the start of this pandemic. As chair of the Public Facility Commission, I can tell you that if rain was forecast for 2 weeks, the city supplies sandbags to residents who need them. But in a 2-month-long crisis shutdown, we all had to fend for ourselves. Our seniors, disabled, or immune-compromised residents were told at the last city council meeting to get a bandana or scarf. So I hope the city will consider adding a mask or face covering to this year's emergency preparedness kits and make those kits available to all residents as soon as possible. We need to establish an emergency preparedness task force and to create local guidelines of communication in case we get hit with a giant earthquake or major fire or another pandemic. We need our own emergency supplies as well as a format to reach everyone in the community. In life or death situations, we cannot wait for the County Department of Health to allocate supplies or wait and follow Sheila or Eric's lead. We can and should be prepared to protect our residents on our own. Tonight, we will codify the no smoking in multifamily buildings ordinance and an increase in funding for our park. We will also hear about our budget shortfall, a bet on the metro and the new Zoom era of telecommuting. But we will not hear any new ideas on how to keep the residents safe in the next crisis. I hope the City Council can establish an emergency preparedness task force and allocate the proper resources so we can all be better prepared for the next unexpected emergency. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Block.
We now have Yola Dore. Yola, you have 2 minutes to speak.
Thank you. Good evening, Council. Yola Dore, West Hollywood. West Hollywood has been a financially stable city over the years, known for as a tourist destination, a city that's ahead of the game in activities, a city that has more tiaras almost than Queen Elizabeth. It's a city that's been known for its human rights and human resources. But years ago, we faced another pandemic. This brings all of this to mind when we faced the HIV/AIDS epidemic years ago. We came out of that stronger and wiser. Even though we lost lives, we did focus on the people and how to help the people that lived. We've lost that perspective tonight. COVID-19 needs our attention. We need to focus on the people in this community, the very people that had faith enough to put you where you are today. I urge you, before you approved any funding for any source, to look after the people that are suffering insecurities and the businesses that also support you. I urge you, Council, to put people first, not parks. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Dore.
And our final speaker.
The very people that had faith enough to put you where you are today.
Hello?
I urge you.
Hi, sir. You have 2 minutes to speak.
Before you approve.
Okay, I just wanted to say thank you to the City Council for all of the hard work that they have been doing. I was just wondering if there's any way that information could get out in ways that people can volunteer to help in any way that they can. The other day, I was part of a situation where in Orange County, I was able to help assemble hoses for ventilators that are being shipped to New York City. And if there's anything like that people can, volunteer to help in the city of West Hollywood, to either help the city of West Hollywood or the United States itself, it would be great if some of that information could get out as well. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir. I
Thank
believe
you.
your name was Charles. I think there is a link on our website to volunteer opportunities at weho.org. If that's not helpful, you can reach us at City Hall and someone will get back to you about that.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor. That was our last speaker.
All right, so that is the end of public comments. Now we can begin council member comments. Who would like to begin? Shall we start with John Duran? I forgot my alphabetized list.
Okay. Thank you, Mayor. Just a couple of quick comments. Thank you, by the way, City Clerk and others who worked on getting our congressman on the line with us. I think that was really important to hear from him. And I know he's on top of things. It's just great to hear and see that he's in action. I have a question, I guess, for the city attorney, and I didn't give her a heads up. I was going to ask this. Sorry, I usually give the city attorney a heads up, but let me go ahead and ask it anyway. We have adopted an emergency ordinance that is set to expire on May the 31st. It now appears that the governor and the county are likely to extend the stay-at-home orders at least through the middle of May, which means that a lot of our people are not going to be able to return to work or businesses clearly for the month of May and perhaps even a little longer. I know many of us are hopeful that June 1st we'll be able to slowly start to reopen, but even if we slowly start to reopen, it still means a lot of people are going to be in economic hurt. So emergency ordinance can be extended by a vote of the council, I believe, for another 60 days. Is that right? We do this in 60-day increments? And if that's the case, can I request that we agendize that for our next meeting so that we can deliberate whether or not we need to extend that for a couple of more months?
So a couple things. This is not the type of moratorium that has to be extended in increments, but that's a different type of moratorium. But the date is tied to the end of the governor's orders with respect to eviction protection. So yes, we can agendize a discussion about extending them and report back to you on the options for doing so, maybe at the next meeting. We would be happy to do that because we're constantly thinking about what to do at the end of that term. And we'll be able to report back to you at the next meeting.
Then one follow-up question to what you just said. Are we preempted by the state of California, or can we adopt our own resolutions that go further or beyond what the state is doing?
Well, that's a complicated question. One of the topics in the governor's order was to eliminate any question about preemption because he specifically waived some state laws that might call into question whether or not we're preempted. So we're looking right now at our authority beyond the May 31st date to be able to do this. And I will let you know.
Okay, thank you. I just have one more comment, Mayor, and that's on the issue of testing, because I think besides people being worried about rent and being worried about getting back to work, the other issue that comes up quite frequently is the issue of testing. And I guess I want to communicate to the public, but also to city staff. City of West Hollywood, we don't have a health department, and we have to contract with the County of Los Angeles as a general law city to be our primary government agency responsible for the public health in our community. Having said that, however, I think that West Hollywood is uniquely positioned to begin to push into the areas of testing, given the sort of community partners that we work with, ranging from the Saban Free Clinic to Planned Parenthood to the LGBT Center to Being Alive. Many prominent HIV doctors and organizations are based or housed here in the city. We have a community that's been somewhat responsible for creating many of the protocols and guidelines around the issue of testing. And I think along with the issue of testing, we have to do some massive public education, because I don't think it's quite sunk in for people what a negative test means or what a positive test means. In a very public way, our mayor tested positive, and gratefully and thankfully, and he's recovered fully, both he and his husband. but that is not a guarantee of immunity at this point. We don't know for sure whether or not the antibodies that are present are going to provide complete immunity to further infection or reinfection. If somebody tests negative today with a sigh of relief, that doesn't mean I'm not going to get possibly exposed when I go to pavilions to pick up my weekly groceries. And so a negative or positive test is not the end of the question. It's just a snapshot or a point in time that tells you one specific fact. If we are really interested in making sure that our level of community activity and participation slowly gets restored, I don't think we can wait for the state of California or the county of Los Angeles to be responsible for this issue of testing or the continuation of testing. And we should, I believe, be exploring with both the county and the state the opportunity to serve as a pilot program. We have a very insular community. We have a very dense city. We have a population of people who are HIV positive, unlike any other city. There seems to be some correlation between being HIV positive and having more mild symptoms of COVID. Dr. Gottlieb, one of the co-discoverers of HIV, who has a lot of patients in our community, believes it's because HIV positive people produce natural interferon, which gives them a protective shield against some of the more severe consequences of COVID. But we'll never know the answers to any of these questions unless we get into the data. I know that's not our primary function, but we have a community of people that's highly educated, highly motivated, and has been through this before, and we should be submitting ourselves to both the county and the state as a place for some pilot programming to occur, and to make use of all the community partners that we have to roll out continuous testing under a pilot program for 6 to 12 months. Whatever happens this time around, COVID-19 is coming back again, probably after the summer. And whatever we do today will not only deal with the issues we're confronting now, but help prepare us for the year 2021 ahead. And so I just want to say that. I've been in communication with some of our social services staff. I've mentioned to the city manager, and I think we need to find a way to make that happen. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you very much. Councilmember Heilman.
Thank you, Mayor. I just wanted to talk about a few of the comments we got. We did get a comment online about the availability of testing. And I think this individual isn't aware that the city has partnered with Cedars and with County Health Department to provide testing through Cedars. So I think that information obviously needs to be communicated to the person who emailed us, but we clearly need to continue to push out that message that there is testing available for people who qualify currently. I think what Councilmember Duran is talking about is the availability of testing within the community for people who may not be symptomatic, who may not qualify for the testing that is currently being done through Cedars. And I have talked to somebody who has antibody tests who is willing to donate them to the city. We would have to partner with the county as well as partner with probably a university to do the kind of epidemiological study that we would like to see. The problem, of course, is that some of the antibody tests are not really very accurate. In fact, some of the ones that have been approved by the FDA have turned out to not provide accurate results. So we'd need to have some guarantee that the tests are accurate before we start launching that as a community study. But I agree with Councilmember Duran, we should be trying to offer ourselves off as a pilot project where that kind of study could be done. I did want to ask the city manager if during his comments, he will comment about the status of the mailer that we approved. I'm sure he heard the comment as we all did, and I think it's important for us to respond to that. Karen O'Keefe's comment, I think, is a legitimate one as well. if we're ever going to experiment with turning some of our smaller streets into more pedestrian and bike-friendly streets, this is the time to do it, where we're not really going to interfere with much of the traffic, because there isn't much traffic right now. So maybe our transportation staff can look at that. And then Larry raised a comment about emergency preparedness. I think our staff has done an incredible job. Of course, there are things that we could do better. And I'm keeping a list of those things where I think our response could have been better or quicker. And I'm sure that the city staff and city manager are doing that as well. And I think that once we get past the immediacy of this crisis, we should be evaluating our response and looking at those things that really work well and those things where we could improve the next emergency that comes around. I think all of us were prepared internally for the kind of emergency we all anticipated, which was the earthquake type of emergency. And we didn't really anticipate this kind of emergency as part of our emergency preparedness. And I think this is something that obviously our emergency preparedness group at City Hall needs to evaluate and needs to look at, so that the next crisis, whatever it is, we have a quicker response where a quicker response would be warranted. But I do want to thank you, Paul, and thank all of our city staff, and certainly our sheriffs and firefighters who are out there all day long. Really appreciate the work that's being done, and thank you for that. And I know the community appreciates it as well.
Thank you very much, Councilor.
Thank you, Mayor. First, I wanted to say that I virtually attended a West Side City COG meeting, not as their representative, but John Heilman was there. So I'll let you know that he was in attendance as well. April 22nd will mark the 50th anniversary of Earth Day. And the theme of Earth Day 2020 is climate action. I would say that Mother Earth is taking matters into her own hands a little bit right now. We have seen some cleaner air and less traffic, as some of my colleagues have discussed. So there is a little bit of a silver lining. And I agree with the mayor that we really need to look at how we move forward and take advantage of the learnings that we've had during this time, that people can work from home, that some businesses can go on, that we have to be able to work with what we have. And so I'm looking forward to working with the mayor on an item in the near future to see where we go from here and how we can encourage something that will help our climate as well. So happy Earth Day. I do have some questions for the city manager regarding construction. I'm wondering, as part of the item that's on consent, if we can look at tightening hours of construction, at least residential construction, and maybe not have special permits, not be giving special permits, for example, on weekends. We have people that are working at home. We have people that with children who are trying to study and continue their schooling at home. And so I hope that we can figure out some kind of compromise, knowing that even though construction goes on during the day all the time, we have a much different situation, at least for the next month or so. And I also am concerned that people are not following CDC and county protocol in terms of gatherings and masks. I've received several emails from our residents who are concerned about that, and I hope that we can maybe get out some more messaging on that. I have also gotten questions about parking restrictions and street washing and meters. So are those, all of that still, is that also extended through May 5th, through the end of May? Maybe the city manager can answer that question as well. And on the consent calendar, I know that we moved the 5A, 5A, or the agreement to advance tourism business improvement. What I would like to suggest is that we make sure that it's in our agreement that that money, excuse me, my dog is attacking, that money goes towards salaries and rent only. And I know that that was in the staff report, but I just want to make sure that that is in the agreement. That's it. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem.
Thank you, Mayor. If I may add one more adjournment, I'd also like to adjourn in memory of Mary Ramirez, who's the mother of our local sheriff's captain, Ed Ramirez. And so we certainly extend our condolences to him and his entire family in this difficult time as well. If we can add that without objection.
Of course.
I did also attend the Clean Power Alliance Executive Committee meeting. I represented the city at the Sanitation District meeting, participated in the Women in Municipal Government meeting, as well as the California Contract Cities Federal Government Response webinar, which included expertise on how to access federal government benefits, and former Senator Boxer was one of the participants, which was extremely helpful. The National League of Cities had their board meeting this morning with regard to coronavirus response and our continued effort to focus on getting relief from the federal government to small cities like West Hollywood. Right now, we are not getting direct funding from the federal government. It goes to the state, and there is not yet a requirement placed on the state to have that money come to the local level in a set period of time. I know that Congressman Schiff mentioned this, and this is something we've discussed offline, but it is an urgent issue that we're continuing to press for through the National League of Cities. The congressman also allowed us to participate through the Citizens Climate Lobby and had a conversation. And I want to thank Carol Kravitz for her leadership there and the conversation we were able to have about a lot of what the mayor discussed with regard to our current environmental experience and how we can be thinking about those issues moving forward. I also participated with the Norma Triangle residents in a Zoom meeting, and that is an ongoing conversation. Per the request of residents throughout the community, I reached out to the Postmaster General about your concerns regarding mail delivery and postal workers making sure to wear masks and gloves. That is now a requirement, and all employees have been given masks and gloves and should be wearing them. So I know that some people had reached out with those concerns, and that should be addressed as of now. With regard to preparedness, I know California Contract Cities Association in their regular meetings often offers preparedness training that includes simulation activities. And while that certainly doesn't prepare you for everything possible that you could think of, I know that those preparedness trainings, I know Kristen Cook has participated in them and brought them to our own City Hall staff, can really help us think about those unexpected things. But we do also have CERT training, and I know that there's a push to continue to have CERT training. So if people are interested in emergency preparedness training, that does remain available. I want to thank our staff for working successfully with LA County and our partners at Cedars-Sinai to open the testing site that does exist there now. I know that's been a relief for residents locally to be able to access testing at Cedars-Sinai. I know weeks ago we were talking with the county about being a pilot project city in a variety of ways. I was contacted by someone who has an app that will allow for at-home testing and partner with medical professionals through an app interface. So it is FDA approved, but the county Department of Public Health does not recommend at-home testing at this time. And so they would not approve that as a pilot project. That doesn't mean we won't continue to have conversations about other potential pilot projects. I'm glad to hear my colleagues are interested in that as well, and we will continue to push forward to try and innovate, because I think testing is a big issue and will help people feel more certain about resuming whatever the new normal is when we know we have testing available for everyone. Because we don't have a general item like we have in the past couple of meetings, I have just a few questions specifically with regard to the COVID emergency. I've received interest about debit cards like the City of Los Angeles has issued, and the County has also been providing direct funding to residents. Is that something the city can do as well? Are we getting funding yet to be able to make something like that available? Secondly, can we create a letter, heard concern from property owners who have mortgages to pay, and despite our eviction moratorium won't be able to pay them. So can we create a letter that we're able to offer to property owners to take to their banks to let them know what the situation is in West Hollywood, and to encourage them to work with those property owners who are in that situation. I know that the governor was able to successfully work with some banks, but not all banks are yet providing this assistance to mortgage holders. And so if our city attorney could help us draft a letter that could be accessed, I think that would be at least one thing that we can do. People have a lot of questions about the state and federal benefits that are available to them. Perhaps we could create a webinar like we did for renters in both residential and commercial spaces that we did last week. I think that would be a successful topic and something that's very much needed right now. I recently heard that West Hollywood is underreported thus far in terms of the census. And so I'm interested to know what our continued efforts are to help make sure that people are responding to the census, to make sure everyone is counted. That impacts a lot of things, including our representation by congressmanship. And so I just want to make sure that we're continuing to do those efforts, even though I know we had to suspend the field campaign. I want to echo comments that were made by the public regarding safe streets, and I know that Oakland called it slow streets, but this is a unique time for us to pilot some of those things that we've been trying to get off the ground. Even if we implemented something temporary for the few weeks or maybe months that are remaining of this emergency period, there's a lot that we could learn. And so to the extent that we could get those off the ground, I'm interested to see how we can make something like that happen and experiment. For people who are looking to volunteer, there's a website, serve.ca.gov. There are volunteer opportunities listed there if you are interested, healthy and safe and available to volunteer. And there's a hospitality industry coalition that has gotten together that's looking to lobby at the state and federal level. If you are a business in this industry and you are interested in joining that coalition, feel free to email me and I will connect you with the folks who are organizing it. I would love to hear an update on our food delivery programs. I know that's an essential service that people are really relying on, and there's a question about the ability to expand to meet the need. And so if the city manager could respond and let us know how that's going. And finally, there was a request from the City of Los Angeles. They have brought forward 2 resolutions regarding federal action of mortgage payment relief conditioned on corresponding rental properties during and in the aftermath of COVID-19 emergency, as well as state level action. There were 2 resolutions that they asked us to sign on to. I would ask if those are in order, if they could please be brought back to us for consideration. I think the groundswell of cities asking the state and federal government for these actions would be in order and might help make the case. Thank you very much.
Thank you. And I just have a couple of comments, and the first one is I'm very concerned about our homeless services response. It just seems like it's fallen away almost completely. I'm not sure what Corey's doing, if she can't because of the complexities of this time, but I just don't see that it just doesn't feel right. There are more and more homeless people day and night on our streets, seemingly not receiving services or even access to information about how to take care of themselves. The same homeless people are in the same place after they've been reported over and over again. I have diminishing belief that our homeless services director and staff have an idea about what they're doing, and it might need a big shakeup. I'm wondering if in this time we can once again ask the county if we can put some kind of emergency shelter on their Division 9 bus facility. They were not running that many buses, we know that, but it's just bad, and it's getting worse, and it seems out of control, and doesn't seem like anyone's paying attention. And I'm concerned that if that continues and it becomes rise, then it will be even more difficult to change in the future. And I guess the last thing I want to say is there are certainly versions of what's going on every side of whatever 75-sided coin I happen to be talking about. But one thing I do know is that on March 17th, I went to go have a COVID test. And at that point, there were 10 positive results in the city. And now there are, I guess, 112 or something. There's about 100 more. And I would say that, yes, it's true, not everyone's wearing a mask. Yes, it's true, sometimes it seems like there are too many people in the grocery stores. Yes, it's true that this one and that one isn't doing what they're supposed to do, but it must also be true that most of us are doing our very best, because 3 infections a day in a city of 30,000 is well below an average for a community that's this dense. So I know at the beginning there was a lot of alarm because there were so many infections, but it seems to me that our city, our little 37,001.9 square mile city, has managed to change the curve for ourselves. And I think we all deserve a congratulations to our residents, and big thanks to our healthcare providers, and certainly from the leadership that all of us and the county, and maybe even some people in the federal government have shown, certainly our congressman, of course. So that's all the comments I have. The city manager's report is next.
Great, thank you, Mayor, members of the City Council. I'll give a brief update, and I'll try to address some of the questions and comments that came up during citizen comments, and of course the questions and comments that you have. For the city manager's report, right now in terms of the COVID response and community support, the 2 areas that we continue to focus on is, 1, housing assistance and food assistance for our residents. As of today, we've had over 157 requests for rental assistance. We've drawn down and dispensed over $130,000 to provide that support. The average monthly rent in the city of West Hollywood is just shy of $1,400. We provide a one-time grant of $1,000, and we're going to be looking at expanding that program to provide additional benefits and more resources. And we'll bring more information back to the council at our next meeting. Public safety is continuing to work with LA County Department of Public Health on a number of issues. One of them is really the challenge of the return to normal, and what will that be? Also, the mayor asked that staff bring a report to council of upcoming events for the first half of the next fiscal year. We will be bringing that information at the next meeting, and hopefully we'll also be able to have discussions about what is anticipated from the Department of Public Health in terms of large gatherings. Homelessness, we recognize, and our staff has seen what the mayor has seen. right now, because really the only people out on the street and seem to be congregating right now is our homeless community. Both public safety and our social services are trying to stay on top of that, both from a health perspective in terms of making sure that we're providing access to hygiene and sanitation options. Our partners at Essentia have beds and shelters available, and so does the LA LGBT Center for Youth. The Sheriff's Met team is outreaching and engaging people experiencing homelessness on a daily basis. But we agree, it seems to be more and more prevalent, and we're allocating more and more resources to address that. So hopefully at the next council meeting, I can articulate some of the specific things that we put in place to help address that challenging issue. A number of projects that we've been working on, we're going to be looking at putting on hold for a bit. One of the items that we were working on right now was the hotel capacity study, and this just isn't the time to be doing that survey. So that'll likely be deferred for an entire year. Looking at some of the items that came up, one of the questions was the rent relief and rent support for the community. We have been working with the governor's office. Hernan Molina does a legislative meeting every week on the coronavirus and the COVID-19 crisis. This is one of the issues that we have been working with Sacramento on. They're struggling as well, but we are getting positive traction, and hopefully we'll be able to get something done on a statewide basis. The mailer, yes, the council did give us direction at the last meeting to move forward with the mailer. The mailer got a little bit more complicated because we expanded it a little bit broader. We're in the final stages of the translation to Russian and Spanish and obviously English, and we're hoping that'll be in the mail later this week. Volunteer information, I think the mayor pointed out that it is on our website. We have an entire page on our website dedicated to volunteer opportunities. It's under the help section. So if anyone is looking to lend support to any of the needed efforts, there's a great resource there. Testing availability, yes, testing is available through the public health portal, and they can access Cedars. I think Cedars did 185 tests today, so they've got a rhythm happening there where they're doing close to 200 tests a day. I think it was Larry Block talking about masks and other types of resources. We do a campaign every year through the city and public safety on emergency preparedness. We promote for people to purchase earthquake kits, home kits. A lot of those home kits, like I know I have 4 of them, they all come with masks, and they come with gloves and other types of materials that would be helpful in this crisis. It's hard to do emergency preparedness for one thing, so we really encourage people to have more of a variety of resources at their house and at their workplace. Okay, the construction request from Councilmember Meister. I did get a text from Oscar Delgado and Ben Galan. These are things that we could easily incorporate into the standards. It shouldn't be very disruptive to any of the projects. So if that's the direction from the council, then we'll amend the recommendation in the consent calendar report to allow for greater control over noise and impacts to the neighborhoods. Gatherings, yes, we're getting those emails too at staff's level about public gatherings. I do a daily call with the executive team. Captain Ramirez is aware of these issues. When they do get the calls, whether they come into code compliance or to the sheriff, they do deploy deputies out to dispense those crowds. So that is definitely something on our radar. The parking program we have right now in terms of certain suspensions are in effect. And I got a text, and I think that they're in effect. How many text messages did I get? Where's Oscar? The restrictions through the 15th, but likely what we'll do is just continue it as long as the state emergency order is in place. Let's see, the debit cards that LA City and I believe LA County are looking at, we have examined those as well. We're number one trying to find out if the county program will also touch cities, and whether it's unincorporated area or also incorporated areas. Hopefully we'll be able to tap into that resource as well. The debit card program for the LA City is designed really for people on fixed incomes. Right now, our target audience is a little bit broader than that, and we're leveraging the resources we have in place right now, which is primarily food and rent related. So I think as this crisis goes on, and I think the recovery, it's not going to be a matter of weeks, it's going to be a matter of months. We'll continue to explore other tools that we could utilize to support our community. The request for the letter to be prepared for owners, we are working on 2 drafts, one for residential property owners and also one for commercial property owners. The idea on the webinar to identify additional resources, I think is a great idea. I'll connect with my staff tomorrow and we'll look for opportunities to push that out. That's it. Budget. So we are moving forward with the development of a 1-year budget. Ideally, in the normal world, we would be starting the process to develop the 2-year budget cycle. And because of this crisis, we're hyper-focusing on creating a 1-year budget that does as best we can to balance the revenue and expenditures, anticipating that just this year alone, this current fiscal year, will likely lose $15 to $20 million. We're anticipating that our budget for next year can be anywhere between 15 and 20 million conservatively off, just based on the shutdown of business. We're right now working again to come up with a quick fix. It'll likely have deferral of some capital projects, some drawdown on funds. But as we roll into next year, it's going to be a real challenge for us to look at the new economy and what our revenue base is going to look like over the next 3, 4, or 5 years. I do a bi-weekly phone call with West Side city managers. We're all having these conversations at the same time. We all have the same bad news to share with each other, that our budgets are decimated. Just a interesting fact, and I really appreciated the congressman's discussion, and he clearly gets that cities need support. There are just shy of 20,000 cities, incorporated cities in the U.S. The last relief bill provided funding to cities with populations over 500,000. That's only 36 cities. Of the nearly 20,000 cities in the US, only 36 cities are getting relief from the federal government. Of the incorporated cities, nearly 15,000 of those incorporated cities have populations under 5,000 people. Even in the state of California, and I appreciate the leadership from the governor. He's doing a wonderful job, but his 1-year loan of local sales tax for small business will literally push some cities off the cliff, and some cities with major cash flow issues will likely file for bankruptcy. So it's a crisis. It's touching everybody. We're going to look at the budget and our resources in a holistic manner, but it's going to be a challenge for us, even with West Hollywood, even with our strong reserves. The reserves are designed to carry us through a difficult time, but they're not designed to carry us through a decade of a new reduced revenue stream. So there'll be a lot more conversations on this. Thank you. Yes.
Just one more thing to think about. You know, we're going into warmer weather, and we're going to need to be looking at, you know, an alternative to our cooling centers, because obviously that's not going to be an option. I'm just putting it out there. I'm not looking for a response, but just something to think about.
John, you're muted.
And that might be on Tuesday when it's supposed to be 90 degrees.
Yeah.
Or Wednesday. So it's coming faster than we would like. With that said, Yvonne, can we have the impact on the fiscal impact on the consent calendar?
Yes, the fiscal impact for tonight, with the addition of items 5A and 5B and the removal of item 2F, is $801,198 in expenditures, $0 in potential revenue, and $0 in waived fees.
Great. May I have a
Move we
motion to
approve.
move the agenda?
So moved.
Moved by Councilmember Heilman and seconded by Mayor Pro Tem Horvath. Yvonne, would you take a voice vote, please?
Yes. Councilmember Duran.
Aye.
Councilmember Heilman.
Aye.
Councilmember Meister.
Aye.
Mayor Pro Tem Horvath.
Aye.
Mayor D'Amico.
Yes. Motion passes.
Motion.
There we go. Sorry about that, Yvonne. Cut you off. We'll now move on and through the public hearings. 3A has been continued, though I think all of us wish to have this conversation as soon as possible regarding prohibiting smoking in enclosed and common areas within multifamily buildings. To everyone who has been following this, I'm sorry, I'm sure we all are that we're not having this conversation, but we will try to agendize it as soon as possible. I know that I had received a request to take a break between 8:15 and 8:30. So how about if we take a 7-minute break and we come back at 8:20? I don't know how we take a break, Yvonne. Do you suspend the meeting, or do we all just need to put our microphones on mute and they can look at our backgrounds for 7 minutes?
Correct. You can put your microphone on mute and I can remove some of the videos while we're on break.
We'll be back at 8:20. Yvonne, it looks like everyone's camera is on but mine. Is that on my end or? There we go. Start my video. There we go. All right. Terrific. We are now at the part of the agenda for the, we're going to adjourn. We're going to recess the city council meeting and reconvene as the public financing agency for the city of West Hollywood. We'll call that meeting to order, and may we have a roll call vote, please?
Yes, Board Member Duran.
Here.
Board Member Heilman.
Here.
Board Member Meister.
Here.
Vice Chair Horvath.
Here.
Chair D'Amico.
Yes. All right. May we have a motion for the approval of the agenda?
So moved.
Been moved by Mayor, or by Vice Chair Horvath and Member Heilman. All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Hearing none. Is that okay, Yvonne, or do we need to do a voice vote for that?
That's okay. We'll do a voice vote when we move on to the consent calendar items.
Got it. Have there been any public comments for this item, the public financing agency?
No public comments.
All right. We have a consent calendar.
Mayor, I would the consent calendar be approved.
All right. Do we have a second? All right. It's been moved by Member Heilman and Vice Chair Horvath. Second. We'll do a voice vote.
Board Member Duran.
Aye.
Board Member Heilman.
Aye.
Board Member Meister.
Aye.
Vice Chair Horvath.
Aye.
Chair D'Amico.
Aye.
The consent calendar
approved. Consent agenda passes. There are no public hearings. There are no unfinished business. There's new business. Does anyone have any public financing authority comments? Anyone wish to comment? Seeing none, we will adjourn this meeting and we will convene as the successor agency to the city of West Hollywood. I will call this meeting to order. The successor agency to the city of West Hollywood. May we have a roll call vote, please?
Board Member Duran.
Here.
Board Member Heilman.
Here.
Board Member Meister.
Here.
Vice Chair Horvath.
Here.
Chair D'Amico.
Yes. Yes. All right. All right. May we have a motion for the approval of the agenda? Moved by Vice Chair Horvath and seconded by Member Meister. I believe we have public comment on this item.
We did, but the person seems to be, they placed us on hold, I believe. So we will move
Well,
on.
why don't we, yeah, wait 10 seconds and maybe the meeting will catch up with them and they will take us off hold. Are there any commissioner comments on the successor agency?
I have a question.
Please.
Do we know if the state will extend the $9 million that was earmarked for Plummer Park? I believe that falls under the successor agency. And if they will extend it, does the city have to apply for an extension? Have we already applied for an extension?
At this point, we still have an area or a time that we can expend those resources. So we're not pressed up against anything, but it is something that we will have those conversations with the state once the current crisis calms down, because we'll likely need a longer period.
Okay, Yvonne, did we hear back from the person who wished to make a public comment?
No, not yet.
All right. May I have a motion to approve the consent calendar?
So moved.
It's been moved by Member Heilman and seconded by Member Meister. May I have a roll call vote, please, for the consent calendar?
Board Member Duran?
Yes.
Board Member Heilman?
Aye.
Board Member Meister?
Yes.
Vice Chair Horvath?
Aye.
Chair D'Amico?
Yes.
The consent calendar is approved.
Consent calendar is approved. There are no public hearings, no unfinished business, no new business. Are there any follow-on comments from any of the successor agency commission members? Seeing none, we will adjourn the successor agency and reconvene as the city council for the city of West Hollywood. And we will begin with item 4A, which is a northern extension of the Metro Crenshaw line. I believe John Kehoe and Robin, others from community development staff are going to make this presentation. Follow-on comments from any of the successor agency commission members? We will adjourn the successor agency and reconvene as the city council. Someone who just signed on has the meeting on. We will begin with mute your microphone.
Can you turn down your volume? John Leonard, are you on the line as well?
So we have John Leonard, who I think is having a little trouble connecting. It seems like he's connecting his audio now. And Richard Bernard has begun with his screen sharing for this item.
Mayor, can you hear me?
Now I can, yes.
Okay, great. I will start. So, good evening, Mayor Pro Tem and council members. My name is John Leonard, and I'm the Community and Legislative Affairs Manager for the City of West Hollywood. So the item before you tonight is an update on the Crenshaw LAX Metro Rail Line extension into the City of West Hollywood. I'm going to provide a few brief updates, and then I'm going to pass it over to our consultant, Richard Bernard of FM3, to provide an overview of the survey that was conducted a couple of months ago. So the first item that I wanted to touch on is an action that has been since our last update project. The City of Los Angeles Council unanimously approved a motion directing their staff to work with West Hollywood staff county staff, and Metro staff regarding the project. Within the city of Los Angeles, it included a number of departments, including the mayor's office, economic and workforce development, planning, transportation, and the chief executive officer. So the items that we will be working on through that working group include 4 items, and that's the review and comment on the EIR once it is started. It is looking at anti-displacement policies for both residences and businesses along the rail line, so in West Hollywood and LA, as well as affordable housing mechanisms. The 3rd item would be analyzing an enhanced infrastructure financing district to potentially be implemented within West Hollywood and Los Angeles to help finance the project. And then the 4th and final item would be for the city of Los Angeles to look at other funding sources they could provide to the project, similar to what West Hollywood has done. So this is an important step because it formalizes this working group and this process, and it commits the city of LA with us moving forward. So the second item that I wanted to touch on is the environmental impact review contract and the next steps on that. So Metro has been working to procure that environmental consultant and get a contract in place and bring it forward to the board. And at this time, they have selected that consultant and have that contract ready. And the plan has been to bring that forward to the Metro board in either May or June. Similar to all public agencies, Metro is looking at their budget in the face of COVID-19 and the reduced revenues that are going to be coming in. So with that in mind, Metro is going to be bringing forward a budget item within the next month to their board to look at both essential and non-essential costs. To Metro, essential costs are keeping the buses and the rail lines running. Non-essential costs are essentially everything else, including long-range planning. So with that in mind, the Metro board is going to be talking about which non-essential costs should move forward and the level of funding for them. We've spoken with staff, we've had other conversations, and we believe that the northern extension of the Crenshaw LAX line remains an important cost to the board, and that they will continue to move forward with it in the future. One of the things that will likely be looked at is the contract was going to be for 3 phases. The first was going to be California Environmental Quality Review. Second was going to be project engineering, and third was going to be federal environmental review. So those items don't need to occur all at the same time. The California Environmental Review occurs first, and after that's done, the project engineering and the NEPA occurs. So one of the things that's going to likely be looked at is just entering into a contract for the California Environmental Review first. Once that's completed in 24 to 30 months, then Metro would enter into a contract for the other 2 phases. We're also looking at some efficiencies for the CEQA review, specifically trying to narrow down the number of alignments sooner than they would otherwise. So with this in mind, we're still confident that the Metro board is going to move forward with the environmental contract because we have been working on this for so long and because there is pretty broad support at the Metro board and within the communities that the rail line would pass through. And so lastly, I'm just going to briefly touch on the survey, and then I'll let Richard get into the higher level results. So we conducted this survey in January and February. It was to gain kind of general feedback from our community. Certainly we acknowledge that this survey was conducted in January and February, which was before the COVID-19 crisis began. We believe the survey results are still relevant because they were pretty general in nature and really got feedback on some general topics from our residents regarding the rail lines. Those included whether residents were supportive of having rail extended into the city. You know, we knew from prior sales tax measures at Metro that our residents overwhelmingly supported that, but that was more of a question of regional rail. And do you support regional rail? We wanted to make sure that our residents were supportive of rail coming directly into West Hollywood. We asked about alignments and stations, which were preferred above ground, below ground, which was preferred in the city, and then also if the city should help fund it. So we found that residents were very supportive of rail because they are seeking better public transportation within the city, seeking that better public transportation so they can get around easier within the region, reduce congestion within the city, and then also help fight climate change. So we're going to be using this data to inform our outreach moving forward, to reach out to those that don't know about the project, but then to also do some pretty deep dives with our community into the funding of the project. So we're going to have detailed discussions about funding it's hard to have those discussions in a 20-minute survey, which is what we conducted, because of how complicated and detailed transportation funding is. So we're going to do that now that we have seen that our city is supportive of rail. So we're going to be doing some targeted surveys, focus groups, and other detailed discussions to talk to our community about funding and see what level they're supportive of. This is also the right time to do this because we're going to be having those more detailed discussions with the City of LA, County of LA, and Metro regarding the amount of funding they're willing to provide to this project as well. So we'll be able to provide better numbers to our community when we talk with them. So to wrap up, over the next 24 to 30 months, we will see the environmental process start and conclude. During that same time, we will be working with our partner agencies to figure out an effective plan of finance and how much agencies are willing to participate in that. And then also locally doing some pretty targeted outreach to our community so that they all know about the project and to get their feedback on our financing. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Richard Bernard of FM3, our consultant that conducted the survey. Richard's going to give us a very high-level overview of the findings. And then both Richard and I will be available for questions from the council. Thank you.
Thank you, John. And I want to thank the mayor and the council members for inviting me to present tonight. So we'll start. I'll begin with the methodology. We conducted a dual mode survey both online and by telephone, both cell and landline, between January 16th and February 13th. As John Leonard had mentioned, this was people's conscious awareness of the virus locally. Certainly, it was already known about worldwide. We contacted respondents by email, postcard, and telephone. Surveys were completed among a random sample of 546 West Hollywood residents, 18 years of age and older. Of questions asked of everyone, the margin of error is plus or minus 4.4. And in some cases, we asked some questions of some folks and some of the other randomly to test different kinds of nuances, or because we had very long lists. And in those cases, the margin of error is plus or minus 6.2. Survey, as always, in the city was available in English, Russian, and Spanish. And if you notice something doesn't quite equal 100%, that I can blame that entirely on rounding error. So we begin the questions by looking at people's awareness of the proposal to extend the Crenshaw LAX Metro rail line to West Hollywood and connect it to the Red Line in Hollywood. We asked them if they had heard, seen, or read anything about it. 48% said they had heard, read, or seen something, and about 52% said they hadn't heard anything. Among the people who said they had heard something, there was 9% who said a lot, and 20% some, and 19% a little. My experience has been when folks say a little, they generally may vaguely hear of the term, but they couldn't tell you very much about it if you ask them specifically what they know. And if we move on to one demographic slide that I've included in the presentation, I wanted something sort of was striking in the results. We again, I just showed you whether people were aware of this proposal, and we're going to look at it by gender and age in this slide. So on the left-hand panel are men 18 to 49, men 50 plus, and then women 18 to 49, women 50 plus. The percentages at the bottom are the percentages they make up of a West Hollywood residents who are 18 years of age and older. The dark blue is they heard a lot. The light blue is they heard a little or some, and the purple is that they haven't heard anything. And I just wanted to point out that in the case of women 18 to 49 and women 50 plus, that purple color is quite prominent. Almost 2/3 of women 18 to 49 and women 50 plus have heard nothing about the proposal right now, where that's less so among men. 18 to 49, it was 46%, and men 50 plus, it was 38%. So it's not universally known about this project at this time. Now we're going to move into attitudes, whether they favor or oppose extending the Crenshaw LAX rail line to West Hollywood and connecting it to the Red Line in Hollywood. We asked them, based on what you know or just my mentioning it, and I pointed out that at least half the folks don't know anything about this, would you favor this proposal? You've got 8 and 10 saying they would favor the proposal, 13% would oppose it, 7% undecided. What's striking here is the intensity. Strongly favor is almost 6 and 10, whereas strongly oppose is only 7% of those people asked. And then we re-asked the question in a slightly different way. We asked if they favor or oppose the City of West Hollywood providing funds to extend the Crenshaw LAX rail line to West Hollywood and connecting it to the Red Line in Hollywood. So what's different here is we're now asking whether they're willing for the city to provide some of the funds. Now, I'll be clear, we didn't ask where the funds would come from, how much the funds would be, but just conceptually would they support it. And here you see 73% said they would support it, 20% would oppose, 6% undecided. If you look back to the conceptual idea, 80% favored it. We're now dropped down to 73% who favor the idea of West Hollywood providing funds. We're still, a plurality of people say strongly favor, close to 1 in every 2. And now slowly, but very small, strongly opposed has increased to 13%. But nonetheless, there's about a little bit more than a 7-to-2 ratio of favor to oppose this proposal. Moving on, we asked them, we mentioned a series of different destinations that the rail could go to. And we asked them, how likely would it be for you to use that rail to go to these destinations? The dark blue is extremely likely. The mid-color blue is very likely. I've aggregated the extremely and very likely on the right-hand side. The lightest blue is somewhat likely, and the purple is not too likely, and then the gray is they didn't know enough to offer an opinion, which was very small. Everyone had an opinion on this. 77% said they were extremely or very likely to use this to go to the airport. You may recall that this was a prominent item in Measure R, of which West Hollywood residents voted very highly in support of it. This continues to be strongly favored. Going to and from downtown, 68%. Going to and from Venice, Santa Monica, and other beach cities, 64. Going to Hollywood Bowl, 64. On the lower end, but still pretty strong, though the intensity has dropped by almost half, using it at night or on the weekends to go to restaurants, bars, and clubs. Now, in some cases, people don't go to restaurants, bars, and clubs, and that could be one of the reasons why. The other reason, of course, is the very successful use of the pickup that's used on Santa Monica Boulevard. That might be the reason why they don't feel it's necessary. And getting around City of West Hollywood, as people have mentioned tonight in the City Council meeting, people like to walk and ride bikes. So perhaps for that reason, it's not as great as some of the other options. We then provided them with different sites, both in West Hollywood and around West Hollywood, where a metro station could be located. And we gave them a scale of 1 to 7, where 1 is a very bad idea for that location for a station, and 7 is a very good idea. And we told them they can choose any number from 1 to 7. The dark blue is very good. The mid-color blue is good. And the lightest blue is somewhat good. And you could see on the extreme right, I've aggregated the very good and good on the right-hand side and ranked those numbers. Now, statistically, since the margin of error is 4.4, many of these are very, very close in nature. But among the leads were Fairfax and Santa Monica Boulevard, La Brea and Santa Monica Boulevard, and Cedars. But not too far back and statistically very close, the San Vicente Santa Monica and La Cienega Holloway Santa Monica Boulevard. Lower down, particularly not by much in terms of very good and good, were the Grove CBS Studios and LACMA. And then we went a little deeper, but specifically within the context of stations located in West Hollywood. And we gave them this description. The city and Metro are considering how many stops and stations should be located along the east-west Santa Monica Boulevard route in West Hollywood. One option would be to have 3 stations starting at either San Vicente or La Cienega, running east towards Hollywood, with stops at Fairfax and La Brea. Another option is having 2 stations, one at Fairfax and one at La Brea. And finally, there's also an option of having a single station in the city at La Brea only. So those are the routes being considered through the city of West Hollywood. And we asked them if they would prefer or would they oppose these individual stations. The dark blue is strongly prefer. The light blue is somewhat prefer. I've aggregated the total prefer on the right-hand side. The lighter purple is somewhat opposed. The dark purple is strongly opposed. Again, aggregated the opposed on the right-hand side. And the gray is no opinion. And statistically, I would say the top 3 are very, very close. It would be hard to differentiate. And you'll notice it's the location of the most westernly station and the number of stations that could occur because that is the most westernly station. So among the leads are starting at La Cienega with a total of 3 stations, starting at Fairfax with a total of 2, and starting at San Vicente with a total of 3 stations. All statistically very close, though I'll point out the intensities of the 3 station options are much higher than the one for Fairfax with 2 stations. Now, we introduced introduced some trade-offs to respondents. Typically, people think of things in one dimension, and we wanted them to think a little bit broader because, after all, the council, city staff, and planners, metro planners, are going to be think about multiple dimensions simultaneously. So we gave them 2 options, and we said which comes closest to your opinion. And I've ranked it here among the opinion that came the highest, or this was the most preferred. Every second interviewer heard a different option order, so it was random. And so in this case, Metro Rail in West Hollywood should be built entirely underground, even if it increases the cost of the project, versus Metro Rail in West Hollywood should be built entirely at street level, which will decrease the cost of the project. So the underground versus street and the cost dimension, 60%, 6 in 10 chose the underground, even if it costs more. Only 25% chose street level in order to have a lower cost amount. So you basically have a 35% gap between options here. The next trade-off was the city of West Hollywood should partner with Metro and help fund the extension project because it will guarantee its completion, and will bring Metro to West Hollywood within 10 years, significantly sooner than is currently proposed. Versus the city should not provide funding to Metro, even if it means not guaranteeing that Metro Rail will come to the city. And if it does, it would not be for at least 30 years, which it's planned right now to occur in the later 2040 period. 76%, 3/4, chose the option to bring it quicker to West Hollywood and for West Hollywood, the city, to be providing some funds versus the city not providing funds and waiting for at least 30 years for it to come to the city. And then we wanted to introduce some features and elements associated with extending the Metro Rail service to West Hollywood. And we asked them, how important would this feature or element be to you in terms of supporting this? The dark blue is extremely important and the mid-color blue is very important. I've aggregated the very important on the right-hand side. You can see the numbers are very high. I'm going to provide 2 slides showing this. The lead items are reducing future traffic congestion in the city of West Hollywood and reducing pass-through traffic, which is a little bit more specific, that causes congestion on the city's main street and side streets. As you know, West Hollywood has a lot of pass-through traffic where people are just trying to go from point A to B, and the best way to do it is through West Hollywood. And then also scoring well is making it easier for West Hollywood residents to get around the greater Los Angeles area, including to and from work, and allowing people who commute to West Hollywood for work to use public transportation instead of driving. And then as you go down the list on the next page, numbers are still high, though we're starting to decline, reducing areas' contribution to climate change. We've often found I found in focus groups around climate change issues, people feel like little portions of a community, be it West Hollywood or just Los Angeles, only can contribute so much. And some people see it as a much broader issue and West Hollywood can't make the entire change for climate change. So that number might explain why it's gone down a little bit. But in general, people strongly support the issue of reducing climate change in the city. And as you go down to the bottom, you'll see things like improving pedestrian safety, widening sidewalks, adding crosswalks, lighting synchronized signals. Typically scores well in the city, more so than almost anywhere else in the county, but the intensity of extremely important has dropped relative to the other items. So after we've given them information, we re-asked the question that we asked initially. In conceptual terms, do you favor or oppose extending the Metro Rail line to West Hollywood and connecting it to Hollywood? I'll remind you on the left-hand side was when they had no information from the survey. It's what they brought into it, which we saw earlier that about 50% knew nothing about it. The favorability was 80%, opposition was 13%. 7% didn't know. After the information talking about the potential for the different alignments, the number of stations, the location of statements, where it could go, and the benefits, the features of having Metro rail line through the city, support moves up to 88%. Strongly favor remains statistically about the same, almost 6 in 10. Opposition declines again statistically modestly by 3 points, but 88% either strongly or somewhat favor. We then re-asked the question about City of West Hollywood providing funds for this proposal. Again, the pre-information, they were at 73 favor, 20 opposed, with 46 strongly favor. And then after the information we provided and re-asked the question, favor moves up 7 points from 73 to 80, so beyond the margin of error, and strongly favor moves up 7 points as well from 56 to 53. Opposition declines modestly to 17%. I'll remind you in conceptual terms, the support is at 88% favor, 59% strongly favor. Introducing the city providing money, that favorability drops 8 points from 88 to 80. And strongly favor drops slightly to 53, but these are still very, very strong numbers. I've been doing this for 17 years. And granted, I didn't ask how this money would be provided, but in principle, this is a very strong, favorable number. You may remember that I've asked the question about West Hollywood providing funds to this proposal twice. If someone said somewhat favor or strongly favor each time, they're put into the consistent favor category. 7 in 10 consistently favored this over the survey, both in pre-information and post-information. 14% were consistent in terms of strongly opposing or somewhat opposing, and 16% are what I call swing or persuadable. They needed more information. That more information led them to move from favor to opposed to favor, or mostly from undecided to favor in this particular case. But that kind of breaks down where people are conceptually on this. In conclusion, there's modest awareness of the proposal to extend Crenshaw and LAX rail to West Hollywood and connect it to the Red Line in Hollywood. Despite this, the vast majority favor bringing Metro Rail service to West Hollywood and specifically favor this Crenshaw LAX rail line. Not only do large numbers support the extension, but they also support the city providing funding for it. Residents foresee taking Metro Rail to get to a number of places, including LAX, which was the most popular, but also to downtown beach cities, the Hollywood Bowl as well. Residents support every proposed area for a new station. There's a slight preference for locations at Fairfax and Santa Monica, La Brea and Santa Monica, and at Cedars-Sinai when we give them the larger number of choices both in and outside the city. They also want more stations in the city with the highest proportions, strongly favoring La Cienega or the San Vicente option, where both of them have 3 stations going along Santa Monica. Messages and features focused on providing more alternative and easier ways to get around and reducing congestion in the city are the most effective. And while pedestrian and other infrastructure benefits are well received, they are less valued aspects of the extension. In summary, support is overwhelming. Residents believe the area needs public transportation to help them get around and reduce congestion within the city, particularly traffic that's passing through the city. Majorities or more would use it for everything from commuting to work to going out at night. They want more than one station that runs underground, and they want the city to help pay for it so it gets completed faster. Though again, we did not ask how that money, where the money would come from and how it would be paid. Happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Richard. Before we ask questions of Richard, I think there is one member of the public waiting to speak.
Yes, we have John Leonard. John, you have 2 minutes to speak on item 4A. John, I'm sorry, John Erickson.
Hi, thank you. Although John Leonard is a great guy, so happy to be associated. Hello, Mayor D'Amico and council members. The success of the survey results of the item 4A is indicative of the investment that voters decided with Measure M and the continuing push to advocate for the advancement of Metro to the city of West Hollywood. With having said that, 80% of the people surveyed in support of the project, 73% in favor of the city potentially providing funding. And then on top of that, when people learn more about the project, those numbers going up to 88% and 80% respectively. The people of West Hollywood are signaling that this is a critical issue that they care a lot about because of the positive impact that we just heard that it will bring to everyone's lives. As we are experiencing now, public transit is an essential service, and while a lot of us may have already known this, access to public transit is a human right. Our essential workers from all walks of life are using Metro every day to get to and from work, and bringing this much needed relief to West Hollywood is critical. I am supportive of the city continuing to push Metro at their May board meeting to move forward and approve the routes suggested in the staff report, and urging them to begin the EIR process. While Metro has many items before them, this item is critical to the communities all the way to the Hollywood Bowl and to Inglewood and to LAX, and bringing all of us together is super important to make sure that the city continues moving. Additionally, as the survey results indicated, a lot of East Sider residents like myself knew very little about the project. And I think if the city wanted to create the same type of ambassador programs that the city did for community leaders and city officials to sign up to help with and get the word out about Metro as they did with the census, I think that could go a far way to help make sure that all communities in WeHo that will benefit from Metro coming to our amazing city know all about it. Thank you, and I hope everyone stays safe.
Thank you. Are there any questions for Richard? Any questions for John Leonard? This item, I believe, is a receive and file. Is there any action, John, you're recommending that we take?
There's no action to be taken. It's a receive and file of the report and the presentation.
Okay, I'm glad we took the time to explain sort of how this is going. Lauren, I see you have a question. I think you're muted, so you need to unmute yourself.
I was muted. I was just wondering when we will be moving into the next phase of the research where we actually tell people how much this project could cost the city, and what type of research we would be doing.
Sure. So I think that with the uncertainty around everything right now, we're going to be slightly delayed on that. If COVID-19 were not happening, I can say that we would move into that pretty quickly, probably within the next 6 months. So if everything played out the way it would have, Metro would have approved the EIR next month. We would have started having these deeper discussions with City of LA and County regarding funding, and we would have started that outreach at the same time. Certainly we have to be nuanced in when we start those discussions and how deep they are at certain points, because we want to know the information from the City of LA and the County of LA and Metro in terms of how much funding they're going to provide as well. So we don't want to give incomplete information when we're doing that outreach. But our plan really is to try to do that outreach throughout the period and use the information that we're getting to even do more deeper outreach.
Okay, thank you.
Mayor?
Please.
Okay, thank you. Just want to make a quick comment to John Leonard and staff on this. Mr. Bernard, thank you for your presentation. It was excellent, as always. Thank you, Richard. I think it's important for us to stay the course on this. We have really two emergency situations going on simultaneously. One is COVID, but the other is a great economic depression, which is likely in the future. I'm hoping the November elections end up with a change in the White House, and if that in fact happens, building infrastructure, I think, moves very quickly to the top of the list to give the federal government the vehicle, pardon the pun, but the vehicle to create more jobs and more opportunities. And I think we need to remain shovel ready and ready to take advantage of that sort of federal activity. At some point, the Congress is going to have to figure out how to get 20% of our people out of unemployment lines and back into work. And one of the places where they can make a significant investment in federal dollars is in infrastructure. So I think we need to have just a little bit of foresight here and to have ourselves ready to go, assuming that there is a new administration come 2021. Thank you.
Thank you. With that said, we shall receive and file that item. And please, Councilmember Horvath, Mayor Pro Tem Horvath.
Thank you, Mayor. I also want to thank Richard and all of our staff for bringing this forward. I know this was a request of council to go back to the community and have this conversation. I think it's important. Clearly, our numbers show that we need to continue having these conversations as much as we think we're saying it enough and talking enough about it. The more we talk about it, the more we inform people about it, the more excited they get about it, and the more supportive they are of bringing Metro Rail here. Clearly, there are some things that were not surprising. People wanting to see rail underground, preferences for certain stations and things like that. But what we do need to do is make sure that we're continuing to have conversations in the community every step of the way, because it's clear to me, we've gone to the ballot box several times on this, and in addition to this survey, so we are clear, the people of West Hollywood would like Metro Rail to be coming to West Hollywood. The question is how, and so making sure that we have that conversation with people along the way is going to be important. And I think that every step of the way we've been going so far, we've had check-ins just like this, where we've been able to have public discussion and get public input on some of those finer points. And I expect that we'll continue to do that along the way. But I agree, this is something that needs to move forward. One of the very prominent reasons I've heard out in the community over the hundreds of meetings I've attended over the past however many years is access to healthcare. And we know that getting a rail to Cedars will be critical for our community, but communities in the surrounding area, both people who are accessing healthcare services and people who are getting to their job at Cedars and in surrounding healthcare facilities. So in this public health crisis, we know that access to care is important, and that's just one more reason we should be supporting Metro at this time. Thank you again.
John Leonard, one more question. So you said that the routes for the EIR may be limited in order to reduce the scope of the EIR. And I would guess that would mean limited both in number of routes, San Vicente, La Cienega, Fairfax, La Brea, but also in whether they're above ground and below ground. And I just wonder when we would know that, and if you're suggesting that the council would have a chance to support or not support any chosen routes that might be examined through the environmental document phase.
So both are a little bit different. Right now, the routes that are moving forward with the EIR are the La Brea route, Fairfax, and then a hybrid, which is a combination of both La Cienega and San Vicente. So there's a hybrid route that goes up Fairfax and then turns near the Grove and goes on Beverly and comes toward the city of West Hollywood. And one potential alignment would go up La Cienega and one potential would go up San Vicente. So there's essentially those four, but the last two are kind of the same. They just change at the end. We had been supportive of moving forward with the Fairfax alignment and then that last alignment that was a mix of the two. The city of Los Angeles had asked to also continue to look at the La Brea alignment. So Metro had been supportive of moving forward with just two items as well. So as we move through the EIR process, Metro would like to get down to just the two after we've done some more work with the city of Los Angeles. In terms of above grade and below grade.
And the two would be the La Brea and the La Cienega San Vicente alignment.
It would actually likely be, from our conversations, the Fairfax and then and then the Western combination one. And we would, and for the Western, we would continue to look at both La Cienega and San Vicente because it doesn't change very much. For underground versus above ground, at this point, the vast majority of the lines are going to be below ground. And when looking in West Hollywood, they're essentially all going to be below ground. It's just after looking at things closer, that's what makes sense. It doesn't make sense to have these above ground. And Fairfax was always going to be always below ground, and the hybrid would have to be all below ground too. So that's
our
not as much
advocacy a year ago to not allow for this to happen above ground in our city seems to be working.
Yes, I mean, Metro is on board with having these underground. It is what makes sense.
Great.
So,
okay. If there's no other comments, shall we move on to item 4B, excuse me, the West Hollywood Master Plan, West Hollywood Park Master Plan Phase 2 Implementation Project. I believe this will be an update from Oscar Delgado and Steve Campbell and Helen Collins. So I'm not sure all of them will be joining us, I hope. I see Dan's square and Steve's square. Welcome, Steve.
Hi, I think we have Dan Adams lurking somewhere.
Dan is, yeah.
That's all. How are you?
He's in the Charles Nelson Riley Square on my screen.
Thank you so much. I'm Steve Campbell, the Director of Facilities and Recreation Services for the city. Tonight's item requests increases in the spending authority for certain contracts directly attributed to the West Hollywood Park Phase 2 project, including those with CBR Heary, Waveguide, and Smith Emery, who does the inspections and testing on the project. The item also requires requests an increase to the project budget to provide the necessary funding for those amendments just mentioned, as well as amendments authorized by the City Council in the past, such as the recent amendment to LPA's agreement. The amendments, when authorized, were funded through the contingency available in the project at the time. The $8.4 million requested this evening will rebalance the project budget and provide sufficient funds to move the project forward. The construction management team is moving forward and working to resolve any issues that are with the project, including those related to construction and claims, etc. There are outstanding claims on the project, and we continue to work to resolve those at this time. I'm sorry, the contingency that we're requesting could also be used to fund a portion as well as potential change orders in the future for items such as escalation, potential tariffs. These will also be used or required to be balanced with a contingency that we're asking to replenish this evening. With respect to the status of construction, we're now over 60% complete, and construction is occurring with the contractor and the subs abiding by the restrictions of social distancing and face coverings as required by the orders for the COVID-19 emergency that we're in. The completion date is for the project is May of 2021 for the building and the pools, with approximately May of 2022 for the other areas of the park. If the council would like additional details on the status of construction, as I mentioned, Dan is here with us tonight, and he'd be happy to provide those. I'm also available for any questions related to the staff report. Thank you.
Yvonne, I don't know if you texted me about whether there's someone to speak on this item. I'm sorry.
I didn't text you. We have no speakers for this item.
Thank you, Yvonne. That said, do we have any questions for Dan? No. Does anyone have any questions for Steve or generally, or do we want to make a motion to move this forward?
Mayor, I had a question, and I will move the item reluctantly. I think we're all recognizing that we're in a difficult position and we need to move the project forward. I guess my question for Steve is, part of the park project is the landscaping, and that aspect of it isn't really being done by our current contractor. I believe it's being done by somebody else, or would be done by somebody else. Is there a way for us to speed up that aspect of the project, or is it your recommendation that we get the building completed first and then move forward with the remainder of the project?
Yes, the landscaping is actually included as part of the work under the current contract. The building will be completed first as part of phase one. And then phase two includes the demolition of the existing pool and auditorium. And phase three would be the Robertson Commons area. And that both of those areas include all of the landscaping. Okay. There are potential opportunities to speed some things up, and we'd be happy to come back at a future meeting and talk about those with a little bit more clarity. We're obviously, working very, very diligently now to keep things moving as quickly as we can. And it's difficult in the current situation, but nevertheless, the contractor is working and moving forward.
So, Steve, I had a,
You're still muted, John.
There you go. Sorry about that. Now can you hear me? Thank you. Steve, I had a question for you and Dan and Paul and maybe my colleagues, but given that the park is closed and the likelihood that there will be large public gatherings for probably the next 12 months, have you considered putting a construction fence around the park and demolishing the auditorium, starting the work of the monument, just sort of accelerating everything, since the reason we didn't do that is because we knew our residents might have a problem with us closing the park to them, and now the park is closed. And certainly it may open at some point this summer, but it might close again. And I just wonder if it's worth, a couple of weeks of talking about it with your contractor amongst yourselves and coming back to us with a proposal to accelerate the schedule, not paying for acceleration. I'm not suggesting that, but providing the contractor with the space to do that. It might be easier for us to get rid of the auditorium, start the monument. The pool is closed. You know, it's not an ideal set of circumstances, but if they could finish all of it in 12 months or 16, it might be worth the sacrifice. And so we're not voting on that, but I'm wondering if it's even worth asking you to spend a couple of weeks thinking about it.
Yeah, absolutely. It's actually been the subject of some recent conversations. I think there's an opportunity there to perhaps accelerate the completion date, and we'd be happy to look at that and talk about it a little bit more in depth with the contractor and others, and come back with some recommendations for that.
All right. Lauren, I saw you raise your hand. Yes.
Yeah, I just want to reiterate concerns that I've expressed in the past about the construction management, and that you know, the fact that we keep increasing this budget, and especially the budget of the construction management company that's supposed to be managing this construction. I would think at some point it just something is not going right here, and I'm not a professional in the construction industry, but it seems to me that if we hire a construction management company, they should be accountable, and I'm not comfortable with paying them more money. I know that may not be what the majority of my colleagues feel, but I just wanted to express that.
Well, we could vote on that separately if you would like, or we can just make a motion to move the entire item. I'm happy to do it either way. I hear your concerns. I share them in many ways, but I also have the sense that jumping off one horse and trying to jump on another while it's moving is a very complicated thing to do. But I'm happy to support your interest in voting on that in a particular way, if somebody wishes to divide that up, or make a motion the other way. And if no one says anything, I'm just going to make a motion that we move forward.
Mayor, I tried to make a motion earlier, so why don't, following up on your suggestion, why don't I go ahead and move everything in the recommendations except the construction management contract, and then I'll make a second motion on that.
I'll second both.
Not mine.
Those are my dogs. Hold on 1 second. I asked nicely. I don't know if it'll work. Okay, there's a motion to move everything to the construction management fee. It's been moved by Councilmember Heilman and seconded by Councilmember Duran. Is that correct?
Yeah.
Okay. Yvonne, may we have a vote?
Councilmember Duran?
Aye.
Councilmember Heilman?
Aye.
Councilmember Meister?
Aye.
Mayor Pro Tem Horvath?
Aye.
Mayor D'Amico?
Yes. All right.
And
motion passed.
Mayor, I'll go ahead and move the construction management contract recommendation.
Second.
All right. It's been moved by Councilmember Heilman, seconded by Councilmember Duran. Can we have a voice vote, Yvonne, please?
Duran? Councilmember Heilman?
Aye.
Councilmember Meister?
No.
Mayor Pro Tem Horvath?
Aye.
Mayor D'Amico?
Yes.
Motion passes, noting the no vote of Councilmember Meister.
Terrific. We are now moving on to new business. 5A and 5B were moved to our consent calendar. And we are now on to item 5C, which is the election of the mayor and the mayor pro tem for the next term. Are there any nominations for the mayor? Yes, Councilmember Heilman.
Yes, I think it is time for Lindsay. So I would nominate Lindsay Horvath as our next mayor.
All right, are there any, oh, and it's been seconded by Council Member Meister. Are there any other nominations? Seeing none, shall we take a vote on that?
Councilmember Duran?
Aye.
Councilmember Heilman?
Aye.
Councilmember Meister?
Aye.
Mayor Pro Tem Horvath?
Aye.
Mayor D'Amico?
Aye. I'm so relieved.
Congratulations.
Thank you very much. I am honored to have been nominated, and I appreciate the support of my colleagues.
Right on.
And I will certainly be counting on it over the next year.
And are there any nominations for the Mayor Pro Tem role? Councilmember Duran.
I'd like to nominate Lauren Meister for Mayor Pro Tem.
I will second that.
May I speak?
Yes.
I appreciate the nomination. I actually would like to switch and ask Councilmember Heilman if he would be willing to switch with me. I know that's the order of rotation, but I'm going to be dealing with small businesses, including my own, over the next few months. And I would just, if possible, would rather not have, the ceremonial activities, et cetera, that go along with being Mayor Pro Tem. Although I appreciate the support, I think that it would be better, for everyone for these next few months, and so the next year, if Councilmember Heilman would be willing to step in and change the order, shake it up a little.
Councilmember Heilman, do you accept?
I do, and Lauren, I think we all understand what you're going through with your business, and whatever we can do to support you, and if switching the order makes it easier for you, I think I'm certainly willing, if my colleagues are willing, to help you out with that. And we know you'll do a great job when you're mayor, and we know you'll do a great job on the council. So whatever works best for you.
That would be great.
I will second that.
And I would just say that I want to focus on helping to rebuild our small businesses, not just my own in the city, understanding where they come from, where they're coming from, and the challenges that we're all going to have. So I'm not stepping back. I'm just saying, just moving my focus a little bit.
Sounds great. So all those, Yvonne, can we take a vote on the making John Heilman the Mayor Pro Tem?
Yes. Councilmember Duran?
Aye.
Councilmember Heilman?
Aye.
Councilmember Meister?
Aye.
Mayor Horvath?
Aye.
Mayor D'Amico?
Yes.
The motion passes.
All right. Congratulations to both of you, all three of you, all five of us, everyone. There are no excluded consent calendar items. There are no legislative items. Do we have any final public comment, Yvonne?
No final public comment.
Any final council member comments?
Mayor, if I may, there are two fun announcements to end on a positive note. I wanted to congratulate our city's communications department, which has been nominated, today, 4/20, for a Shorty Award for Recreational Reefer Madness PSA to educate the community about medicinal cannabis as well as adult use cannabis in our community. And so they have been nominated. The ceremony will take place on May 3rd, and we wish them best of luck. I also wanted to give a couple shout outs. Members of the community had expressed their gratitude for masks from Larry Block, who took it upon himself to give masks to individuals in the community. And so I wanted to make mention of that and thank him for that. And I also wanted to thank the West Hollywood West Residents Association, which I understand has made donation to Cedar Sinai, as well as to the West Hollywood Sheriff Station and Fire Department Station for their frontline efforts during this time. All the ways that our community is giving back is truly remarkable. They're all truly remarkable, and I just appreciate everyone stepping up and for their generosity and compassion during this time. Thank you, Mayor.
Absolutely. And we will see you on the next council meeting on May 4th. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, Yvonne.
Thank you very much, Yvonne.
Thank you. You're welcome.